Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. On this episode, got a lady from the city. I always love saying that. Those of you who don't know who the city is or where the city is, just Google it. Google it. Probably shows up on Google Maps, the city. Amanda Russo, entrepreneur, business coach, business advisor, and a whole list of other things she's got going on in the city. Amanda, great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
This is going to be fun. I can't remember the last time we had somebody who was actually in the city talking.
Well, I was going to say, when we say the city, we usually mean like Denver. Like
Right.
we're a little far west.
No. See, that's naivety coming in on you, son. The city is New York. Anybody that you ever meet from New York, that's what they just refer to it as, the city.
The city.
Yep.
Yeah.
See?
I've been too west for too long.
Yeah. There you go.
Although I have to come visit you because, it is Denver, isn't it? Right. Some of the best snow, some of the best mountains, arguably, south. So I need to come pay you a visit, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like I just invited myself, actually.
You did. Let's go.
That's okay.
If we ever get snow, we can go skiing.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And we'll have to plan those dates. But what I want to know is why you jumped out of corporate world and started your own business. What happened? I mean, did somebody smack you, stub your toe? The infamous piano fall out of a building, because that happens in the city all the time. I've seen
All the
videos.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why'd you start your own business?
It's a great question. So funny enough, about 5 years ago, 5 or so years ago, I was laid off. And, I love what I do. I've been doing it for a really long time. I don't want to put a number to that date, but I've been doing it for a really long time. It feels like since the beginning of time. So you can come up with a date for that.
Beginning of your time, at least, right?
The beginning, exactly, the beginning of my time. But I've been doing it a really long time. So I really do love what I do. But, I think being laid off a couple years ago was quite eye-opening in two ways. One was, look, I really love what I do, and it is, or it was at the time, very challenging to find, that sort of balance where we weren't really going to blur the lines. I am a business operations professional. That's what I do. I don't do financial oversight. I don't do, let's say, coaching like you guys. There's a lot of things that I don't do, but business operations covers a lot of ground. And I found that when I was looking for jobs, at the time, it was a lot of hybrid roles. And that just kind of indicates to me that a lot of companies aren't clear about what an operations professional does and how much that in and of itself actually is. And so if I'm totally transparent, I really didn't want to be a business owner. I really wanted to go work for someone else and do what I do because I am really good at it. I really do love it. But the stars didn't align, or so I thought. And so after about a year of kind of plugging away and trying to find the right role, right? I just kind of had like an epiphany. I said, look, I can help a lot of companies, high impact, high value, high impact, right? With their business operations. I'm agnostic. I've had a very colorful background, right? I don't have like an upward, the traditional upward trajectory. And so that's what I decided to do. I don't want to do marketing. I don't want to do, and that's frankly not what we do. And so the winded answer to your question is, I didn't want to go outside the lines because I know what my core competencies are, and it's a lot. I don't know that companies know necessarily what I do.
You mentioned that it took you kind of a year of finding yourself, plugging away at different things. How was that loss of identity like for you? Because you were working on this job for a long time. We get this a lot with veterans and athletes that we talk to on the show, where it's like there's this big gap. Is that what you were looking at during that year?
It was really wild, honestly. It feels, and maybe some of the viewers can relate to this. It sort of feels like an out of body experience. I identified before, past tense, I did identify with what I do. And it was so wild. And when I was applying for jobs at the time and just kind of looking at what's out there, I'm noticing the hybrid, and I'm thinking, you don't want a true operations expert to do your marketing. Like those are different skills. Those are two very, very different skills, right? For someone who's going to process map and process model, that is not the same person to do your marketing. Like you don't want to see that. And so it was very much like an out of body experience, because I don't know how to do any of that. And I couldn't imagine why I would know how to do any of that. So it really was an out of body experience. It was.
How do you create this model, especially since you're doing it for others?
Yeah.
And I've got a book on my shelf, and I bet you got it on your shelf, called The First 90 Days. And, in that sense of the whole theme of that book is it takes 90 days to figure out the business
Right.
that you're hired into. But people are hiring you. They don't want to they don't want to cha-ching you out 90 days. I bet they probably want something quick. So how are you doing? What's that?
Yeah,
That's
actually, thank you for asking that. That was a great question. So it's really funny, believe it or not, engagements with us can sometimes be a lot longer than that. They can be a year long. They can be 3 years long. It depends on what the ask is. I think the misconception with business operations professionals is, look, we live in a microwave age, right? And I think a lot of us can kind of relate to that. It's I have this problem, I want the answer now. We use Google, we use WebMD, we use like all of these different things because we want the answer right now. But the catch here is a true ops professional, right? A true operations subject matter expert. It does take a little bit of time to fact find, to draw the process maps, to figure out what the full current state is, right? It's impossible for me not to talk to the team. And sometimes the team is spread all over the country, all over the globe. And it's important for someone like me to spend that time with them, understanding what their day-to-day is like. And then we get it, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but then we get into what their shadow IT problem looks like. And that shadow IT is just a fancy way of saying like all the different apps that everybody in the company has downloaded that central IT doesn't know about. And it doesn't come from a malicious place. It comes from I have this problem. I went to Google or whatever it is, and I downloaded this application to help me do this. And it opens the door for a whole host of really negative things like a cyber attack. But throughout the journey of what folks like me call the discovery process, we find out all of those things. I find out what Camden is using to solve whatever problem that central IT doesn't know about, because he's not getting the support from his managers, right? So it takes a little bit of time. The discovery process, by the way, can take 90 days. Sometimes it could take just 5 weeks. It just depends on how big the company is and how big the ask is. But I think it's important to say, like, yes, in a lot of cases, companies want really the quick answer. But I think, if we look at supply chain right now, that didn't work. And that's been cooking for about 20 years, right? So the fast, quick answer, the cutting the corners, the just, yeah, I have this problem, just tell me what to do. It's a lot bigger than that. And so I think it's kind of important to just, not, I'm going to try not to be winded, but to not, kind of expect the microwave answer. I would say if you're going to work with someone like me and you really want to solve that problem and you really want your business to have the longevity in the market that you're planning on having, you got to spend a little bit of time doing the work.
You kind of were talking about a little bit of what we would call like a secret sauce of kind of getting in there and understanding the operations and getting up to speed on things. You don't got to give away the full ingredient list, but what's a couple things that you use or tips and tricks for people that may not be in the same type of business as you, but just I think this could transfer really well as far as just like perspective and understanding
Absolutely.
other people's businesses and those type of things. I would love to hear any of your thoughts on that secret sauce.
Absolutely. So it's unfortunately, and this has become both a good and a bad problem. A lot of the secret sauce is in my brain. And a part of the secret sauce is kind of the way that you communicate, right? So I would say for maybe the folks that are watching, it's more about, okay, so if you're in the C-suite, you're a senior manager, you have to get out of your office. Like if you're in person, right? If you're working in person and you're in the office, you have to get out of the office and start to walk the floor. You've got to get to know the people that work for you, right? You have to build those relationships. And it's not just let me hover over Camden and find out what he's doing and how much time he's actually spending on Amazon, right? It's how's it going? Hey, what's going on with you? How's your wife? That kind of thing. Or how's your partner? Or whatever, to be politically correct. You want to get to know them.
All right, we ain't.
Right. You want to get to know the people that work for you, because you also want to break down some of the traditional barriers that sort of lie between senior management, C-suite and up, right? Senior management and up to boots on the ground, so to speak. There usually is an us versus them, and you want to kind of break down those barriers. That's one. So the first tip I would say is walk the floors, get to know the people. If you're a remote business like we are, I have a global team, and I make a very conscious effort to spend one-on-one time with my team members. And for me, it's really important to drive the point to them that this is your time with me. You get to vent, you get to share work, you get to talk about whatever you want. You want to talk about your Aunt Tilly, fabulous. You want to talk about your cat, also fabulous. You want to talk about your work, fantastic. But it's your time to spend with me. And I think it's really, really important. So if you're a remote business, make sure that you're taking out the time to spend that one-on-one time. Make sure that you're listening and not listening to answer. So that would be the first tip. The second tip is ask questions. So the one thing that I notice a lot in my business, and I help other companies do this, is from medium size to enterprise, but we also work with some of the smaller companies. But the thing that is consistent that I notice is management making decisions about, let's say, technology, what they should and shouldn't buy, what they need and what they don't need, without speaking to anyone who's actually doing the work. And why that's a misguided sort of decision, and I mean that respectfully, it is a misguided decision, because you don't actually know, one, what the problems are. You're too close to it. And two, you're not in the day-to-day work. So the one-off situations that Camden might face, Otis doesn't know about, because you're so used to it, right? So you just do it. It's kind of like second nature to you at this point. So, and you don't even realize that you're doing it. So that's the other reason that people hire someone like me, is that you're so close to it, you don't even realize that it's dysfunctional and it doesn't have to be this way. So that would be the second tip. And then I would say the very, very last tip is step outside of your business and ask yourself, do you really know what it's like to be your customer? And I know that there's a really famous show, Undercover Boss. There's another show called The Prophet, right? I'm probably closer to The Prophet than I am the Undercover Boss. But the thing that's pretty consistent with those two different television shows that maybe your audience might identify with is you're so close to the business that you don't actually know what it's like to be the customer, what it's like to work for you. So it's important to figure out how you're going to step outside of that and discover what it's like, what it's really like. Ask your customers, what is it really like? Ask your team, what is it really like? What are the customers saying? And then make adjustments. Or, obviously then I would say that consult someone like me, because you really want to nip this problem in the butt. And that was not a cheap sell. I'm just saying, like, truly at this point, like when I'm talking to companies that are in the supply chain space, right? The warehousing, warehousing, shipping, and logistics space, they've already done that. And you can only do that so many times. And then you need to work with a professional, because this is much bigger than, most, I think, folks are equipped to take on.
Right. Because if you have a thought experiment that you do with your other executives to work on flipping your perspective, that's only going to work 5 times before people, know the cheat codes.
Right. Exactly. And then there's I don't have enough time, so I'm just going to quickly run through this, because especially if you're an executive, you've got a laundry list of things to do, right? Like, nobody's sitting around twiddling their thumbs. We're not bored. Nobody's bored at this point, right? And so, especially if you're pressed for time, if your to-do list is ever growing, like everyone's is, it's very, very easy to miss really important things. So that's why I say work with a professional, because it'll cost you more money in the long run, really. Yeah.
And you're 100% right. And you said several things I got to jump on too, because, management by walking around is truly a leadership style. It is more difficult in a dispersed organization.
Right.
But you know what, like you said, meeting one-on-one with your team members, or even a larger organization, you could break it down and call it direct reports, and then maybe with the entire team once a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Camden, it flashes me back to our guest this past summer, Janine Boland, and one of her big things that she does with her clients. She's a coach, and she's an author, and you think that you're busy? Go see Janine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But one of the things that she said that has stuck with me is, if you're not spending at least 1 hour a week with each of your direct reports, you're doing them and your business a disservice. And it's not that much time. I mean, really, it's not that much time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, hiring somebody from the outside, whether you're actually hiring or you got a friend or whatever, man, you spend so much time looking at the trees, you never see the forest.
It's true.
That person walks up. I mean, the other metaphor I always love to use is my Marine Corps analogy of, I'm pounding my head against the wall to get through the wall, and somebody comes up, taps me on the shoulder, and points at the door that's 5 feet, right? I mean,
exactly.
It's not always that simple, but sometimes it is that simple.
Yeah.
So I want to change subjects, because you said something that is in everybody's mind right now, and that's supply chain.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. And I brought it up, and then I thought, gosh, I should probably.
You're like, Otis is going to jump all over me on this one.
Yeah.
And so what's the deal? I mean, when am I going to get my bottles to bottle my whiskey? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Personally.
Soon, maybe not soon enough, but.
Spoken like a true consultant. Soon.
It's funny. And again, I don't want to give you the microwave answer, because it's supply chain. We're a global economy. Whether or not we want to realize that, we're always going to be a global economy, and it works. We produce bottles in X country, and they export it because those bottles won't support their local economy. Here in the US, we'll only use the US at this point, but locally or domestically, it's very, very expensive to produce a lot of the products that we import, right? And we purchase from overseas. And that goes for Australia, that goes for Europe, and that goes for every other continent, right? And so we're always going to be a global economy. Now, the problem is that this problem with supply chain has a lot to do with, and I realize that the average person thinks about supply chain and they think about the external supply chain, but supply chain is actually both internal and external. And what I mean by that is it's a bit of a domino effect, right? It's like a give and take. Next week, I'll be publishing a blog on this on my website that I encourage you to look at, because I give you a diagram of a supply chain, and it explains visually the internal and external factors of the supply chain. But if we take the internal supply chain, right, it's operationally set up, right? So there's raw materials, there's import logistics, there's assembling logistics, right? Depending on the kind of company that you are. So to answer your question, Otis, when are you going to get your bottles, right? Well, it depends on how quickly companies think about rectifying their internal and external supply chains. And that's going to take streamlining your internal operations. And that goes for across the board in the supply chain space. That means looking at bulk discount purchasing, single source suppliers. Sorry, I know this is going to be winded. That means, looking at where we're importing and exporting from. And that doesn't mean we're going to exclude one country from another. That's not what I mean. I mean, you have to have more than one choice, back to the single source supplier. That means streamlining your internal operations, because you can't replace the raw materials as easily. And we're learning this now in this current state. If you make an error, or if your project manager doesn't relay the message to the warehouse manager, and the warehouse team starts assembling, a multi-million-dollar widget, and the measurements are wrong, that material is very hard to replace. And that happens. You'd be really surprised. So
yeah, I've seen it. Fortunately, been part of it, but seen it.
yeah. And so the catch here is that you will. There's a couple of things that we need to correct within the industry, because it is broken, and it is not a new thing. Again, this has been cooking for about 20 years. And we frankly, it's kind of like time's up. We've got to now address this. And that's going to take working with professionals like me.
What I guess what role do you think that because we kind of talked about this earlier, what I love to call BandAid solutions,
Yes.
that are the half-ass ones where it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, well, this will fix it right now.
Right.
How much has that been exacerbating it? Because it sounds like, this is something that contributed to it, of course, as people kept plugging the holes, going, yeah,
Right.
no, we'll worry about it later.
Right.
And then now it's really coming to a head. And the reason I asked that is we had on, I think it was Eric Zanin a couple months ago. We were talking about, I was sharing an article I read in Wall Street Journal about the guy who saves Christmas. And he was
Right.
some supply chain director for some toy company that was driving trains through China to get them to Russia it was like this whole crazy thing.
Right.
But what I was thinking about as you were talking, going back to those stories, is as nice as that is for you getting your toys to America in time for Christmas,
Right.
that's just it just seems like one of those things that would exacerbate and just continue to have worse effects.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the BandAids, making microwave decisions, and then taking that BandAid and putting it on, sort of the iceberg, kind of crash. I think that's kind of what the result of what we're seeing now. And what I've learned is, I didn't know this 5 years ago, but I learned throughout the years, and now over the last 24 months, that folks like me are harder to come by than I originally thought. And a lot of the larger consulting companies reach out to someone like me because I process map, I process model, and then we put an action plan to that, right? So I don't just draw the maps and draw the model and say good luck, right? Because that's what we've been doing. And by the way, most people don't actually process map and process model. And so in a lot of the cases, to answer your question, is someone like me is going in and I'm having to clean all of that up. That's why I said earlier, it wasn't a shameless plug. It was more like, this is going to cost you more money in the long run than you realize. So you bite a little bit of the bullet now and just spend a little bit of the money, work with someone like me. And it doesn't have to be me. I'm just unique in that I do process mapping and process modeling, which is quite tedious. Pick the right professional, and it will no longer be a Band-Aid. It will be like like an incision that never happened. A lot of the clients that we have, it's been a life-changing experience, really. So, it's quite gratifying, actually.
I bet it is, because you go in and you're like, I see these problems. Here's problems, A through R or whatever, right? I don't know why I said R. That's an odd letter to pick out, but here's the list of problems.
Yeah.
They're Mr. Owner, CEO, whatever the client is, and here's the cost to fix these. And oh, by the way, if you don't fix these problems, here's your cost going forward.
Right.
And what it is, and this is what I love about what you do, is you're creating efficiencies for the organization.
Correct.
I mean, bottom line is you help the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to make it to where we can do more with the number of people we have right now. You know, I think of one of my clients and how they've organized and how many, we'll just call them direct bills, you know, client facing people they have, and how many they only have in overhead. And they've done a really good job of creating all these automated systems. And that's the only way they've been able to survive it.
Yeah.
Ooh, tell you what, when their computer goes down, it's really bad.
Yeah.
It's how do you keep those processes going? Which I don't know, I'm rambling here with some thoughts about that, but it's really what, if you could picture the ideal client setup that you could go in and just be the savior, you know, what would that look like?
Yeah. So I would say the ideal engagement is a client reaches out to us and says, look, I have said problem. And I really want to fix it. We really need to fix it. And we work with them, right? So it's not like a dictatorship, right? It's not like do this is the only way to do it. We have to give them choices. But we work with them.
A consultant that comes in and collects data and then goes away and says,
no. And then I tell them, this is how you do it. This is the only way to do it. And there is no other way. So we want to make sure that we're creating a plan. First of all, we collect the data, we draw the process maps, we draw the technology stack maps. And then we have a really robust conversation about your current state. And it is very, very challenging to argue with facts. Now, that conversation doesn't just happen at the C-suite or the senior management level. It happens with everybody. Because, and I'm going to say boots on the ground, and I don't mean, you know, I mean the frontline people, the people who are doing the work, interacting with the clients, they're the front-facing folks. They don't understand what it's like to run a business, right? So the two ends of the spectrum are two totally different ways to look at the business. Why doesn't management just buy this and this and this? Well, because those are $20 million programs. That's why, you know, and it's a lot of money, you know, to take out of the budget, right? And then senior management, or, you know, management C-suite above, doesn't understand what it's like for the frontline team, right? And what they're dealing with day to day. So the process maps, technology stack maps, they break down a lot of those misunderstandings. And then we have a really robust conversation about current state, right? And so clients that come to us, the process map reveal, the technology stack map conversations are very quiet on their part, because I am uncovering the things that will blow your mind about your own business, what's happening right under your nose. And that does help with the rest of the conversation about how we're going to move forward in fixing it, what the best approach is, and what choices you might have. We are impartial here in my firm with technology selection, and we do that deliberately, right? So the technology has to solve the problem, integrate with your current technology stack. We look at what we can phase out that's probably legacy or old. And we see what's going to work for the team. So there's an employee engagement piece of this that I talked about today in my blog about, you know, your team, right? This great resignation situation that we're in. It's being driven by many factors. And it's not just, I want to be my own boss because it's time for me to be the CEO. It's driven by people not being happy in their current role. So when you talk about your current organization and operational dysfunction, we want to make sure that we're picking solutions that are right for the team, solving the problem, integrating with your current technology stack. We'll be able to scale with you. What is the direction of the business? And so there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different aspects to kind of our approach and what we do and how we do it. And so that's kind of why we sort of take that approach, if that makes sense.
There's one thing on this that I've been thinking about. And it goes back to something earlier, and you're talking about, the managing by walking around. We were talking about for a bit.
Yeah.
Really, this one I'm going to start it off as a rugby question, so it's going to go over to you, Dad. But so much of that goes down to like the breaking the barriers. You talk about the Great Resignation. Love the name on that. Haven't heard that yet. But and so much of that is not understanding your purpose inside of the company and the vision and like all these type of things that go back to breaking down the barriers. And the reason I'm starting off with the rugby question, Dad, is you are the first person, and probably because you were the outsider American who hadn't played much rugby, who I heard start pushing back on the idea of the forwards versus the backs. That it's, we get to do this, you guys get to do that. We don't play together. We don't any of that. And so many more coaches I've worked with since then have really started to adopt that. There's no number except for a set piece. There's no number unless you have a specific job at that time. Everything else, you get to do all the different jobs. And I think what I found in my experience coaching is that you get so much better continuity because it moves past this, like the natural, like us versus them, of like fighting with the backs, and even though you're on the same freaking team, and then it becomes this unified thing where you're fighting against someone else. And so I want to throwing it over to you, Dad. How effective do you think breaking down the barriers is, and how do you translate that more over to business?
Well, the more cohesion you have in an organization, the better it operates, the more efficient it is. One of the great ones that I've experienced in a couple of businesses I worked in, and even some that I've advised and coached, is the whole operations versus sales. And the sales selling something that operation can't execute, and it's looked at in a vice versa sort of thing, and a finger pointing thing. And what it really amounts to, the problem is there's no communication between the two. There's no integration. And I think back to one of the best examples of this I've experienced in probably my entire life was Paw, my dad, an aerospace engineer, doctorate of rocket science, building the most advanced airplanes in the world, spent a month in England with Air Force airplane mechanics, so that he could learn, that, hey, Dr. McGregor, if you would have put that bolt over here instead of there, I wouldn't have to pull the whole thing out to do that, that wear out reply or wear out part. So that's that integration. And I think it's such a critical piece in your business. If you have any kind of us versus them going on, even I would say, and I think back to, and I think I read this in the, I'm just going to throw it in, whether it's in the book, The Way and the Power, or not, but I'll just give them the credit. Your mind does not know that negative sarcasm, right? Your body recognizes self-deprecation as a joke. So self-deprecation, that joking back and forth, there's a point where you cross the line and you've actually created animosity, even though you may be doing it over a beer.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, Amanda, what's your experience in that us versus them when you've worked with business?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, and this is not a cheap look. That is why companies hire folks like me, right? Because the frontline team, the frontline team is usually quite candid with someone like me. They want to get it off their chest. This is what we're dealing with. This is what's going on. And they want it solved, right? They're kind of at their breaking point. And they don't feel like they're being heard from their senior management. And vice versa, right? So senior management is like, oh, they're not working fast enough, or they're whatever, right? We have too much headcount, not enough money and too much headcount, right? It's always like the same story. And so when you work with someone like myself, it's very important to back to your example with the sales team and the operations team, right? It's important that if we are going to drive sales, right, we're going to have the frontline team, the sales team, drive this widget, right? Sell this thing. Internally, we have to be able, and marketing team, right? Marketing team is going to push it. The sales team is going to sell it. We're going to do all of this stuff. But if the internal team can't deliver on that item, this whole initiative is a wash, right? Who failed here? Was it the marketing team? No, but they'll probably get blamed. Was it the sales team? No, but they'll probably take a piece of that hit, right? Was it the operations team? No, but they'll also probably take a hit. It's the communication, back to your point, Otis. People have to communicate. Can we deliver on this? If we push this, what are sales going to look like? Are we set up operationally to take on this influx of business, which is something I deal with a lot. I get it. You want to grow to be, a $150 million company. I get it. Can you take on that kind of business? You're running your business off of Excel. You're using local drives. You really think you can turn this business into a $150 million business overnight with no technology and a lot of headcount who's kind of putting their own spin on everything? It's a misguided plan. Has it happened? Absolutely. You would be really surprised how many businesses that run like a mom and pop, they're a $2 billion company and they're running like a mom and pop. How much more money could they be making? How many more customers could they be serving? Once you understand that your operations needs to be streamlined and functionally sound, you can do a lot of things. And you can give your internal team more important, valuable things to do. Ask them, talk to them. Obviously,
the communication aspect.
I'm just
sorry.
On that real quick. In that now I've almost lost my train of thought. It's coming back though. But is that exact thing? Because I tell you what, I've met a lot of business owners in my life.
Yeah.
Gone. How the hell are you still in business?
Right.
I mean, literally.
I mean,
it's like, or you flip it the other way and go, well, damn it, that dude can do it. I can do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think almost 5 years in now, I can honestly say I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by a lot of things. But I've seen businesses, like I said, $2 billion companies running like a mom and pop. Like, it's really wild. And I don't know how they've gotten that far, but it's like one crack in the dam, right? Like, it's one crack in that dam wall, where, just one little wind, and it's going to break open. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, bringing it back to the rugby side of things, what I was thinking is, you talk about, forwards versus backs, Dad. You got the kicking. There's always the kicking. The backs just kick away the ball. They don't care. They don't care about all of our hard work. Like, that's the thing that people always say, right? And what we were talking about.
Ball in.
Exactly.
I hope your viewers don't expect me to know rugby, by the way, because I don't know anything about rugby.
I was just thinking that's going to be some homework when I start giving like, all right, go watch 5 minutes of game film so you know what we're talking about. But what it is how much that communication is such a big aspect of it. Yeah. And so I think back to it, and sorry, Amanda, you're going to bear with me for just a second on this.
Oh, good.
Dad,
I'm following you. I'm in the game right now.
Perfect. The two big philosophies in rugby attack: position and possession. I know you're personally a possession guy. I lean towards possession, but then there's the people who are position. Our friends in the northern hemisphere over in Europe that just kick the ball all the time. They just keep kicking it, just keep kicking it. And if you're a forward on that team, it's they're just kicking the ball all the way. But if your coach, if your captain is communicating to you that, hey, we're doing that so that you can go do your job there, and then we can set up there. And it's just that flip of perspective. And it's amazing once you've seen that. I've seen that with some of the college kids I've coached, where they're like, why are they freaking kicking the ball so much? And I pull them to the side. I'm like, so you see how we just kicked it 30 meters that way. And then you are so freaking good at your job that we got the ball back. Like, that's perfect. Yeah. Like, it's like, in the big scheme of things, it's perfect. Why wouldn't you do it? But it takes that understanding of the vision and everyone's individual jobs. So we always talk about rugby imitating business, and that was one that I was like, gosh, that really hits me right on the head there.
And I think, Camden, to your point, especially when I'm working with a client, there is a piece of look, we've got all these buzzwords today. This part that I'm going to talk about is labeled as called change management. For someone like me, change management is embedded in who I am, right? It's all about communication, and a part of change management in any change initiative, right? So when we're streamlining internal operations, it is exactly that, Camden. It is, we're going to change the way you do your job. Okay. We're going to automate it. We're going to add technology to it. We're going to change the processes. We're going to eliminate the paper, whatever it is that we're doing. Now, for some people who've maybe been in that role for 40 something years, and they've been doing it this way for over 40 years, right? There's a thing called job insecurity. And job insecurity can become a very real thing where that person or people will come up with a story about what's about to happen that no one mentioned. They just make up this story about what's going to happen, and then they're going to fire me, and then I'm going to be, and then I'm too old and I can't get a new job, blah, 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 right? And so they come. So it is really important, to your point, to make sure that in any change initiative, in any business operations initiative, that I'm the coach, I'm the Camden in this scenario, and I remind you of where you fit into this equation. It's not, we're not firing you. We're going to teach you a new way to do your job. And we're going to spend a lot of time with you. We're going to train you on the technology, and I'm going to, hopefully not, but I'll coddle you a little bit. We're going to go through the training, right? We're going to have lunch and learn sessions, and you're going to feel so good about the new environment that you're going to forget what it was like before. And so it's really, really important to be the coach in Camden's example, right? And make sure that everybody knows where they fit in to this equation, that they all play a really important role, that this is not a way for me to just fire people because I think you cost too much money and whatever. Maybe you do, and that's not up to me, right? And it's going to be up to CNN, and that's a different conversation. But it's more so about like making sure all the players or all the team members understand, yes, this will change, and where do you fit into that equation? You're going to fit into the puzzle, right? Everybody has a piece in the puzzle. It'll look a little different, but it's important that we manage that conversation, and that's why I keep reiterating: work with someone like a professional. I would say me, but I don't want to keep doing that. Work with a professional who knows this stuff and understands. We work with facts. We talk about facts. We present the facts. Manage the conversation. Manage the story. Right, Camden, you're not getting fired. Your job is going to look a little different, but we're going to help you get there. Right, so we're going to do this together. And luckily, I've been very fortunate to be able to leave clients in an unimaginable, in a positive way, situation where they don't even remember what it was like before. So be the coach, make sure people know exactly where they fit in to the game, right? So to speak.
And that makes me think of, and just real quick on this, that makes me think a lot of making players change positions. And it's a very similar type of concept of what you're talking about, where it's like, hey, dude, like, we got these all-stars coming in for our team, like, using the U of A example here of, it's like, hey, we got these all-stars coming in. Do you want to be 7th in the depth chart and fight your ass off to maybe play a game? Or you want to lose a little weight, go over here, learn a little bit of a different position, get a little faster, those type of things. It's like, we're not firing you. This is me going to you and saying, because I've had this conversation this past year of like, hey, like, I want you to play, you are good, and just like, talk about the business example, like, I want you in this company. You are a great team member, but we got to make some changes if we're going to be effective. And as long as you properly communicate that and they have the trust of you as a leader, then you can go really far with that.
Would you like me to give you the latest buzzword for that? Since we've been doing this since the beginning of time, but now there's a buzzword to match it. It's called upskilling. And so I'm just going to teach you new skills, teach the old dog new tricks, right? We're going to learn new tricks. We're going to learn a new way to do things. And, will you do your current job? Yeah, it'll look different. Maybe, I should say, not say yeah, I should say maybe, right? Because your job may be totally manual. You may be using a typewriter. We're just not going to do that anymore, right? We have Alexa, right? So we're going to speak it. So it's going to be very, very different. So communication, making sure that, but upskilling is the latest buzzword for that. I'll let you know when that changes, because it's driving me nuts. Like we've been doing that. Someone like me has been doing this forever. This is not a new concept, but we have a buzzword now for it.
Oh, you got to have the new buzzword.
Always have to have a buzzword. Always a buzzword. Yeah.
That's how you become a thought leader, is you create a buzzword, right? And
Create a buzzword.
and then now you make it a hashtag buzzword, and then you're set, right?
You're it, right?
You're the expert.
I love it.
I've just I got to plug one of my favorite business books now, is because you talked about change is leading change by Cotter, and I got so much out of that book. Probably read it 7 years ago, but it's just there's so much to that change management and how to use it and how to be that change leader in your organization, whether you're you're the top guy or down at the bottom, because even down at the bottom, it takes a little bit longer, but you can still influence change. There's still a way to do that. And that's where the challenges really start. And I think that's great that you look at it that way. And, truthfully, that's like your business parentheses change manager, right? I mean, that's
yeah. I mean, I would encourage anyone in any business that is going through a change initiative, right? They're adding a new piece of technology, they're phasing out something. Do that in conjunction with change management. I know that there are change management leaders and people are, but I personally, and this is just from my own experience, I can only speak to that when you do that in conjunction with the actual change, I find it to be more effective, as opposed to putting in the new technology, picking the new thing, doing the new thing, and then taking on the conversation piece of it, where you fit it, right? Because you're already too far in, I think. You've already done the change, and now we're going to talk about it, and people are, feeling some kind of way. A story has already started that you don't know about. So that's why I always say, like, I would encourage any company that's taking on a change initiative, do those two things at the same time.
I was laughing because what popped in my head was Brian Kelly. So just in case you don't follow college football, Brian Kelly was the coach of Notre Dame, said it's the best job in the world until he got a better offer. And the way,
right?
And he's down at LSU now. And the way that he did that, not the best way to do that,
Yeah.
What?
Frankly, he didn't care.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do I got the timeline right on this? They lose their game. He flies home, leaves them in the city they were in, then calls a 7 a.m. meeting the next morning, talks to him for I saw it was 4 minutes, and then out.
After it'd come out on Twitter the night before.
Oh yeah, but I think the main point there is, and without going too far down this rabbit hole, because this is a whole another area, is getting ahead of the headline type of thing, where it's people are always going to tell the stories. The anxieties are always going to come up, and they're going to start writing those stories. And so you as a leader have to communicate that to get ahead of it. One of my favorite examples, I experienced this with my company Rugby and with my co-founder on it. I remember having this day where I was like, damn, this guy's not working. Gosh, he was supposed to be here by 9 o'clock. It's 9:30. Like, oh my gosh, he probably doesn't care about that. And you're just spiraling on this stuff.
Yeah.
And then I talked to him and he's like, hey, so I have a family issue. And it's this whole thing. You're like, oh my God. Like I was telling this completely wrong story because I hadn't talked to him.
It's common. It's really common. And by the way, to go back to your the college football example, people will show us on social media what we want to see, right? But what's happening internally is a very, very different story. And that goes for business as well. And so what I would say to anyone who's kind of looking from the outside in, it is more likely than not, his team already felt that way.
Oh yeah.
Before this whole thing started to unfold. When a leader is leading a company, whether that be, a senior manager or manager, we don't even have to be senior manager, it can be just a manager, right, of others. When you don't care, people know. They may not tell you, but they know how much you care will show.
Mhm.
And as a result of it, you know, oh God, I'm talking about this stupid blog again, but we published a blog today on it, right? And it's called Employee Engagement. You play a part in employee engagement.
Mhm.
And if you treat your team like you don't care, right? Your team loses the game, whether even if they lost, even if they won the game, I don't know how much differently that coach would have behaved, right?
I think
And
you're
I don't-
totally right there.
I don't follow it, right? So I don't really know. And by the way, if your viewers start asking me about rugby questions or football questions, I'm going to talk myself out of a job, right? So,
Amanda
but-
Russo at rugbyquestions.com.
right. So I'm gonna have to. I feel like I'm gonna have to go do some research on both rugby and American or college football. But no, like I said, I mean, I think that that's a great example of like that coach. Who knows how he would have behaved? Maybe not much differently if they won the game, and then calling a meeting the next day, spending 4 minutes or 5 minutes of the team's time at, you know, the early morning hours when people are probably exhausted from that game the night before. People know how much you care, and that's going to be a direct result of how high their engagement is. How much they care about you, how much they care about your business is going to show, and that has a lot to do with you and how you conduct yourself. So
That's spot on. Thanks for that. And what's next? What's next for Cornerstone Paradigm? I mean, since I'd never mentioned the name of your business, I gotta get it out
yeah,
at least once.
that's right.
What's next on the slate? You know, your vision for 22, the 25 vision, whatever. What's going on?
So I haven't formally announced this, and I guess
We
now
love
there's
big news here at the Cam and Otis Show.
there's no better time, I guess, than now, right? But I am writing a book on this, on business ops, and it's going to apply to every single business. So because we are agnostic, most operations professionals are agnostic. So it doesn't matter if you're building a plane, you know, or baking bread at the corner, you know, bakery. The principles in the book are going to apply to everyone, every kind of business. And so I'm writing a book. So that's one. And then I guess for 2022, I'm personally making, or at least going to attempt to make more of an effort to go to a lot more of the trade shows, a lot more of these like public appearances to try to meet more people in sort of their element. And so I'm going to make my own effort to do that. I'll be in Vegas in 2 weeks at the Contact Center Week convention, which is pretty big, and folks that are looking for new call center or new call center technology, and all the things obviously related to operations. I'll be there to kind of talk to them about that. So yeah, so that's kind of what's going on. I mean, couple of other big things coming down the pike, but I don't want to totally speak to them just yet because I haven't ironed out all of the details to it. But I hope that we can make more of a positive impact on businesses, you know, domestically and internationally, and get this, you know, entire business sector turned around, whether that be supply chain, healthcare, call centers, whatever it might be, because it really does boil down to a lot of the things that we spoke about earlier.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So that lets me shift into my second favorite thing, or really my first favorite thing is our what'd you learn? And you know what? I've never heard the term shadow IT. That sounds so secret.
Is that right?
It sounds so secretive.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to latch on to that, and we might have to do a shadow IT audit here at the Tribe and Purpose team. You know, Camden, we'll have to see about that. There's a lot of truth to that, and I can think back to, you know, some of the companies that I worked for, and yeah, even the big IT company where we did a lot of data management, where like, you know, I had all kinds of stuff going on my computer that I probably wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, and it's not, again, like shadow IT is when a company, and I would say 9.9 times out of 10 companies have a shadow IT problem. And it doesn't come from a place of being malicious or taking things into my own hands. It's, I have this problem. I know Dropbox can help me. I know my Google Drive can help me. And that's kind of how it starts. And so, and that just opens up the door for a cyber attack, because those kinds of programs, I don't want to like name any ones in particular, but those kinds of programs that your central IT team isn't managing and monitoring, it's an easy door in. So that's a shadow IT problem, but that's probably another show.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Camden, what'd you learn?
Well, if you're going on a search for shadow IT, I think I know which of the few team members is probably going to be the one, and it's probably the one who does all the IT for us. So don't look at me.
Is that right?
I'll call him out right now.
When he's edited this podcast, he's going to be deleting all the stuff off his computer.
Listening.
I feel like I'm going to have a conference call later with this person. Yeah.
We'll have to set it up.
Yeah.
Well, I had two, and they're both quick ones. Don't worry, Dad. But one, I just had this thought, and neither of us really said it, but Amanda, when we were talking about BandAids, it's don't Band-Aid the microwave. Like the microwave, like that is just such a dangerous idea when you think about that literal example there.
Yeah.
But that's what people are trying to do. They have this microwave solution, and then they're trying to Band-Aid it. And it's like, what the hell are you doing? So that's a great one. Put that on a t-shirt, don't Band-Aid the microwave. But the other thing is, we talked a lot, especially when it's just, me and you, Dad, on the show. We talk about how business and sports have so many similarities. And I've really learned today that holds to an extent of somebody who doesn't have the sports background. I think this is the first time that we've had somebody who actively is like, hey, I don't know rugby. And then I lay out a rugby example and they go, oh, yeah, it's just like boom.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing, because it's, one of those where I think we've joked before, Dad, I'm not sure if rugby imitates business or business imitates rugby, or if you and I just see the world as rugby. Like we're not, like, I don't know which one it is. And we're a little bit closer to answering that question now.
Well, Amanda, I mean, you live in New York, so you have to know Yogi Berra, right?
I do know Yogi Berra.
Okay. So Yogi, I took Yogi's thing of life imitates baseball and just changed it to rugby. That's where I got that from. So
I get it. I love it. Love it.
Amanda, what'd you learn?
So, I learned quite a bit about rugby, and I think it's like a nice way to kind of marry the two, rugby or sports and business, which, I've not really thought about before, but maybe that's a great way for me to relate to certain business owners that might not totally understand what I do and how I can help them and add value. I really liked how you said earlier, like that you're the coach and that you kind of lay out to the team member, the team, on the rugby field, why their move is going to change or why their position is going to change and where they fit into this bigger picture. I think it's like a great analogy. So that is something that I'm going to take away. I might borrow it, as I like to say. I like to borrow, I don't really know anything about rugby. And if, by the way, if anyone asks me any questions outside of that analogy, I'm just telling you now, I'm going to apologize once for it. I don't know a thing about rugby. Maybe you've got me onto something. I kind of like football, European football. But maybe rugby is going to be the new thing for me. Who knows?
There you go. And here's the picture I just had in my head, is that you're walking into that potential client's office and you see like a New York Giants thing up on the wall, and you're like, okay, going to football.
And I know we're running late on this, but I got to add on to that, because it is something that I have found, especially when I coach younger, with the Engage Foundation with the young kids, high school, especially college doesn't matter as much, but the how effective analogies are to like other things that they understand is like ridiculous. Like your example of you see the New York Giants when you're like, okay, I got to time this to football. One of my favorite things to do if I have a high school player who is what we call never ever's, never even seen a rugby ball before, I say, okay, well, what sport did you play? And I will tell you, and over the next 15 minutes, how rugby is exactly like tennis and it's exactly like football. And I'll just, because I can make those connections. And if you can do that, it's so accessible for people. So you saying that you want to work that in, definitely do it.
I'm going to work in the I mean, I had another analogy that I'm going to use in 2 weeks, but maybe I'm going to put that rugby, and now I'm the coach. I'm going to tell you what new position you, I don't know. We'll let you know how that turns out, because it's going to be a contact center convention and gosh, I get all kinds of people at these So who knows? I'm going to use the rugby. I'm going to use the rugby.
Oh, and I'll tell you the secret that if you use the rugby example with any rugby family, one, they won't care that you don't actually know. They will just be so happy and you will have their business.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
a tight knit family.
I'm going to hold you to it and be like, listen, I know a rugby coach, and he's the one who sold me on this. He said, look, if I give you a little bit of a rugby analogy, I'm in. So I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it. Love it.
Perfect.
How do folks find you, get in touch with you, Amanda?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty accessible there. You can either connect with me or follow me, or you can head to our website, which is CPC Change Agent. So there's an extra C in there, changeagent.com, CPC Change Agent. I would say that those are two probably really great ways to connect with us. I would encourage folks to check out our blog. It is full of information, quick tips. We really do have a really active blog. I have a lot of ebooks you can download at no cost. We've got an email list, so we do provide people with a lot of information. If you're at the place where you're kind of curious at how to maybe take things into your own hands, or you want some guidance on things, we do provide a lot of resources. Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thanks. And, thanks for your time. It's been a great show. We've had a lot of fun, learned a lot. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Amanda Russo, for joining us today, and to our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. To learn more about Tribe and Purpose and get started for free, go to findyourpurpose.coach. You can check out recent episodes of the Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.